What's up, YouTube? So today we are carrying on exploring DecentSampler. So today I want to talk about creating an extra layer, doing some GUI stuff, and some more advanced envelope things. Those are some of the questions that came up in the previous video, and quite a lot of you folks actually said you did want more DecentSampler videos. I know they don't do too well, but regardless, you folks wanted to see them, so and I am enjoying exploring DecentSampler, so I don't care what the algorithm says, so I'm just going to do it. Let's see what happens. So anyway, like I said, in this episode, I also just want to correct some mistakes that I made in the previous episode, so just at the end of the last episode on this, I'm going to post a link to that in the description or up top somewhere over here. The room size actually needs a capital S. So one thing you'll notice often with the parameters here, the first word will not be capitalized. And when there's two words, the second word will be capitalized. It'll be like wet, capital L level, right? Mod, capital D depth, mod, capital R rate. That's just something to remember. It's pretty much a standard here. When modulating the parameters, there's a different name. So for example, here, wet, capital L level is actually fx underscore reverb underscore wet underscore level, all caps, right? So that's just something, something I forgot, and I just wanted to clear up at the beginning of this video. So now this room size actually sounds much nicer. Check this out. Okay, so that's the first thing, right? Let's talk about some more advanced attack and release envelopes. However, the sound that we actually have loaded in here without the reverb is just a staccato sound. So having sustains and decays is actually not necessary for this type of sound. Yeah, if you don't understand that, then essentially it's like the sustain parameter is basically like how determines how you hold a note, but here there's no hold. It just a pluck and then decay. So you can't sustain the note in any way. There's ways around this. What we can do is to create an extra layer, maybe do some sound design to make some kind of more legato sound out of the pluck sound. So my favorite way of doing that is stuff like pause stretch. What I often end up doing is just with the instrument that I've got loaded, right, I'll play a few notes through pause stretch, record out a couple of octaves. With the reverb on and all, what we can actually do is let's just make these a bit longer. Actually, you know what? It doesn't matter because we're going to pause stretch them. So then let's bounce these. Let's normalize, bounce in place. Let's open up Paul X stretch. Another thing, actually, I mentioned this in a previous video. People didn't quite get what I was saying. So Sloom by an Anemone, Anem1, or Anemone or something like that. I think I said Anemone, but it's actually Anem1. It's a very similar plugin, but extra features, which is pretty cool. A little bit easier to use as well, and it can stretch a lot more. But we don't need to go all that way. Let's just use Paul stretch. It's free also. Okay, so here what we want to do is we just want to load the sample up and we want to stretch it a whole bunch. And let's see how it sounds. I've copied all those files into that same folder where we were starting the DecentSampler stuff, right? I've just put it into a second folder just to be easier to find and that kind of thing, and just in case stuff gets renamed or like overwritten because of the naming scheme, so it's a little bit easier. It doesn't matter where inside the folder the samples are, because in the code you actually reference to them. So here what we can do is we can press F12 to open up the editor, and what we want to do is we want to actually go edit, add group 2, right? Or group 1, as group 1 is actually group 0 in this instance. So here what we can do is we can start dragging the samples. So this stuff I explained in the previous video. So if you want to learn how all this stuff works, definitely go check that video out. The quick of what I'm doing here is basically just, I'm creating a key. Let's just copy, paste, and then changing the root notes to the correct keys and then dragging them in like this. So we have C, G, and then another C, and then another C here, another G. And it's a good idea to try get it to cover a similar range. So here, for example, you can see we start at C0 up to about G4. So try get it to cover a similar range. Okay, that's definitely working. So then we can save and just overwrite this preset here. What we can maybe do is we can call it 0.11, you know, version 1.1. So we've got like that fallback in case something happens and we always want to jump back to that original version, right? So here what we want to do is we want to actually open up that code, right? So here we can exit this out because that's the v2. And here you'll notice we have these two groups, right? Group 1, group 2. We can actually give some parameters to these groups. So for example, here we can say name equals music box, and then call this one magic. It's a kind of like extra sounds that are coming out of the music box, right? So here what we want to do is we want to actually give it some tags, right? So tags is a really cool system that works either on the groups or on individual samples as well. But it's a much easier way of being able to modulate stuff. For example, if we had like several different groups of the same tag, we could just apply one parameter to control all those tags. We don't have to create a binding for each group, right? So tags equals, let's say, magic. So with the tags, we want to keep things lowercase. And then let's give these ones tags as well. So usually now what we'd have to do is we'd actually have to go in here to the tags and then assign individual ones. But a quick way of doing that is to actually just open up the thing, right? Okay, let's just reload it so it's got the tags and then save it. Developer tools, save preset. Save over 1.1, yes. And so now if we just load this up, we'll see that the tags have been automatically generated here at the bottom, which is really cool. There's a couple of ways we could go about this. We could create like a little menu drop down to be able to choose between the different groups. But with stuff like this where it's the actual sound and then a processed version of the sound, I actually like to do it with some kind of mix knob or two individual knobs. So with a menu, we could actually add a parameter here to the tags, right? So enabled equals true, and then enables equals false, and then we set up a menu that switches between them, right? But I'm just going to leave these as both true, because what we want to do is we actually want to modulate the volume. But just to show you what's going on, what I can do is I can actually set this to false, and now we won't hear that traditional sound, we'll just hear the pad sound, right? Okay, so like I said, let's keep these both at true, and then we're going to set up parameters that are going to be able to modulate these volumes. So like I said, you can actually refer to the DecentSampler documentation to see exactly what the stuff is and how it works and stuff. But to be honest, the easiest way of doing this is to just copy paste some of these things, right? So here we're going to put in another labeled knob, right? I'm just going to put some spaces here so we know where we've started. So with these XY parameters, this is where it sits on the interface. So like, for example, if we set this to 300, it's going to move its X position on the interface to the left, right? Okay, reverb. So now we can go ahead and we can actually change the name of this. Change the label over here. We're going to call this music box. Okay, so here what we want to do is we want to set this to type amp because it's going to affect the overall parameter. Like, okay, so the type here is amp, and then the level we want to set is tag, and then the parameter is capitals tag underscore volume. Okay, and we can actually remove this position because that's got to do with the effects. Okay, this we can leave. Translation 0, 1. Okay, now we save. So we might actually just need to add something here. Identifier equals. This is basically the name of the tags that we want to modulate. So for example, this could be music box. Save. So here we can just duplicate this, paste. Let's set this to, okay, the size of these knobs is 90. So if we set this to 400, it should give us enough space between the knobs. And then we set this to magic. Label, we can set to magic. So this should work. Let's just test it. What we've done here is we basically created 2 knobs that control those layers individually. Let's see how this works. Reload. Okay, you can see that the GUI needs a bit of planning work over here because we've hit a bit of a train smash, but regardless, let's just see if this works technically. Magic layer, music box layer. Cool. So one thing we might also want to do, it's actually easier here in the interface version, is to set up loop modes. So if we select all of these and we just set it to loop mode looping and set the start point a little bit in and the end point a little bit before the end and then give it some crossfade, we should be able to hold those notes and sustain and they'll just keep looping, right? We want to then save this. Save. Let's just confirm by opening this up, and we can see that all of these now have loop enabled 1 with these settings as well. So, okay, that layer has been looped. Let's adjust the interface a little bit. So if we look at these knobs, 445, 515, there's a distance of 70 between these, right? So we can actually then go inverse. So this one can be 375, and then this one would be 305. Let's just see if this works. Cool. Okay, cool. That's sounding good. So what we can do is we can look at some more advanced envelope settings. So here, let's say, for example, let's add in a decay and a sustain so that we can kind of create different types of settings. You'll notice here that this, the groups, like the global system, has a sustain and decay kind of already assigned, even though we just have attack and release. And so that's how those parameters are created, is by assigning them here. But you can also just create like a modulator and then again save it like we did in the actual interface, and it'll add that, right? So here, let's set this to env underscore decay, attack decay, env sustain. And we also just want to make sure that these values are correct. Decays need a value between 0 and 25. 0, 20, that's close enough. And then sustain is 0 to 1. It's just like that percentage setting, right? And we're going to run into that interface thing again where they're all going to be jumbled, or at least like on top of each other. Oh wait, we didn't save this. Control S, reload, not showing. Oh, it's because the names, we left the name attack, release, release, release. Okay, so what we can do is we can actually switch the type of these attack and release of the envelope settings to a different type of control. So something that's more like a bar. And I believe how we do that is using the style flag. So we can set it to style linear bar vertical, right? So let's just say, let's just do it here at the end. Style equals linear bar vertical. Zoom out a little bit. Now we can just copy this and paste it on all of the envelope stuff that we want, right? And now let's move these along. And in fact, we don't need a width so wide on these because they're now bars, right? So let's try something like 30. Let's see how this will work. And then let's also put these on like the far left of the interface. So let's start at like 20 and then 50, 80, 120. Let's see how this looks. Wait. And we should also maybe make the width a little bit wider just because we're kind of cutting out the text there, or we can make the text smaller, whatever. We can actually put these at the bottom here. So we would just fiddle about with the X, Y width parameters to kind of move those interfaces around there. There's another couple of parameters though that I want to talk about that were asked about in the comments of the previous video. Is the curve settings. So I think it's just the attack, decay, and release, which can have curve settings. And so let's just copy one of the knobs, you know, not the sliders that we just created. And the parameter name for that, in fact, we can just copy this entire binding because it's got amp instrument, all that stuff is already in place, right? And pop this here. And then we can just say env tac curve, right? And then this needs a value between -100 and 100. And that would basically set like the logarithmic or exponential curve of the attack envelope. And then the same goes for the decay and the release. So this one we can actually put in that other one's place. Remember, like 475, and then the other one was like 445 or something. Let's just see if this lines up. Oh, it's still called chorus. So with this one, we can actually call it attack curve. Then we just copy that. We can just change this to decay. It's also -100 to 100. And then we can move this to 535 or something. I think that about sums it up for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, if you haven't yet, please consider hitting that like button. I'm going to actually upload this work in progress to my Patreon for all my $5 supporters. So if you want to know what that's all about, check out the link in the description. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.